There was a strange detail in the birth records at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore on April 7, 1915. Billie Holiday's birth certificate had two entries written at different times, one at 2:30 p.m., another at 3:15 p.m. Why were these records kept 45 minutes apart at two separate times? Even stranger, there was a death certificate for a baby who died at the hospital the same day. But this baby's identity was unclear in the records. This inconsistency, discovered by music historians 85 years later, pointed to one of the biggest secrets in Lady Day's life. Was Billie Holiday actually a twin? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the details of this shocking discovery. In 1999, music historian Dr. Angela Mitchell was researching the archives of Johns Hopkins Hospital for a biography she was writing about Billie Holiday. While browsing through old records that hadn't been digitized at the time, she noticed a strange anomaly while examining 1915 birth certificates. The birth certificate registered under the name Eleanor Harris had two different timestamps, which wasn't standard procedure. According to hospital records, Eleanor Harris was born on April 7, 1915, at 2:30 p.m. But on the same document, 3:15 p.m. was also noted in different handwriting. Mitchell initially thought this was an error, but when she researched deeper, she realized the situation was much more complex. Because there was another event recorded at the hospital that same day, the death of a baby registered as Baby Harris. The details of this death record were shocking. The baby died at 3:45 p.m., just half an hour after birth, but the death certificate was missing parent information, only saying Harris family. When Dr. Mitchell compared these two records, she noticed a striking similarity. The birth times and death time were consistent with each other. It was as if two babies had been born consecutively. One lived, the other died. Researching the life of Billie Holiday's mother, Sadie Harris, provided the most important clues to the twin theory. Sadie's neighbors and friends had talked for years about her strange behaviors. Especially when Billie was little, Sadie was often seen preparing two plates of food, but then taking one back. Neighbor women attributed this to Sadie's absent-mindedness, but perhaps this had a deeper meaning. In the 1920s, Dorothy Washington, who lived in the same apartment building as Sadie Harris in Baltimore, gave an interview in the 1970s that was striking. Sadie would sometimes wake up crying at night. I would listen through the door crack and she always said the same thing. I couldn't protect both of them. I could never understand what this meant. Even more interesting were the inconsistencies in Sadie's behavior toward Billie. Sometimes she would address Billie as "A Louise," and sometimes she would unclearly say the other one. Billie had noticed this as a child, and when she asked her mother, Sadie would always dismiss it as confusion. But as far as Billie remembered, her mother always had a sad expression when she said these words. After Sadie Harris's death in 1945, the photographs found among her belongings had become a subject of discussion within the family. Among the photographs were pictures of a baby who looked very much like Billie, but whom no one recognized. This baby wasn't Billie because the photos were taken at different times and showed different clothes. No family members remembered these photographs, and Sadie had never shown them while she was alive. In 1915, infant mortality rates were very high in Baltimore, and the hospital record system wasn't as organized as it is today. Johns Hopkins Hospital was the best medical institution in Baltimore at the time, but it still had problems with record keeping. Records kept for births from poor families were usually incomplete or incorrect. In her archival research, Mitchell discovered there had been unusual congestion at the hospital in the spring of 1915. Birth numbers in March and April were above normal, and this situation had strained the staff. Due to this congestion, twin births were sometimes recorded as single births, and separate files weren't opened for babies who died. The most striking finding was the daily reports kept by hospital nurses. According to the report dated April 7, 1915, that day noted, Harris family difficult birth, twin baby, but this note was later erased, and single baby normal birth was written over it. Why was this change made? And who made this decision? Another document found in the hospital archives was even more surprising. In Dr. William Foster's personal notes, Sadie Harris's birth was mentioned. Difficult twin birth, one baby alive, the other lost due to weak heart. Family told single baby, the other not processed in hospital records. These notes were among the strongest evidence for the twin theory. Billie Holiday's childhood friends and teachers would tell of how she had exhibited strange behaviors since she was little. Her most notable feature was the constant feeling of looking for someone. During recess at school, while other children played games, Billie would often stand alone, scanning the area, as if she were waiting for someone. Elementary school teacher, Miss Sarah Coleman's interview in the 1960s was very meaningful. Billie was a very talented child, but she always felt incomplete. When I asked her, "What are you looking for?" she would say, "I don't know, but I'm looking for someone." It was a very strange situation. Even stranger was Billie's reaction when she saw herself in the mirror. Barbara Margaret Jones remembered, they would bring Billie for haircuts when she was little. When she looked in the mirror, she would always be surprised, as if she didn't recognize herself. She had asked once, "Why do I look single?" We didn't understand what it meant at the time. Billie's childhood games were also notable. She would always play with two dolls and call one Eloise and the other Billie. While playing, she would create conversations between these two dolls, as if she had a real sister. When her mother Sadie saw these games, she would get very upset and take the toys away from her. The emergence of Billie Holiday's musical talent was also very significant in terms of twin theory. Lady Day often said she heard two voices when singing. This situation was initially understood metaphorically, but what Billie described was much more literal. In the 1940s, music producer John Hammond asked Billie Holiday, in an interview, "Which voice do you follow when singing?" Billie's answer was surprising. "There are two voices in my head. One is mine, the other is also mine, but different. It's like someone is singing with me." This situation is very meaningful from a modern psychology perspective. When one of the twins is lost, the surviving twin often experiences phantom twin syndrome. In this syndrome, the person continues to feel the presence of their lost twin, and this presence strengthens, especially during creative activity. When Billie Holiday's studio recordings are examined, interesting details also emerge. Sound technicians had noticed that sometimes there were unexplained echo effects in Billie's recordings. These effects weren't technical errors, because they weren't seen in other artists' recording. It was as if when Billie sang, her voice was mixing with another voice. In 1934, when Billie Holiday was still at the beginning of her career, someone was closely following her, journalist Martha Collins. While Collins was researching Billie's story, she had gone to Baltimore and learned surprising information there. Grace Murphy, a former nurse who worked at Johns Hopkins Hospital, had given Collins very important information. Grace Murphy was a young nurse working at the hospital in 1915 and had witnessed Sadie Harris's birth. What Murphy told had never been published because it wasn't considered appropriate to talk about such sensitive subjects at that time. But this conversation was recorded in Collins's notes. Two babies were born, both girls. One was strong, the other very weak. The weak one died an hour later. Dr. Foster instructed us not to tell the family. Murphy had also explained how the dead baby was removed from the hospital. At that time, there were special procedures for burying dead babies, and families were usually not informed. The dead baby had been buried in the hospital cemetery, and the headstone only said, "Baby." After Collins learned this information, she wanted to talk to Billie Holiday, but Lady Day wasn't willing to open up about this subject. According to Collins's notes, Billie had said, "I don't like to dig into the past, I focus on the present." But Collins wrote that she saw deep sadness in Billie's eyes. In the 1940s, a woman living in Virginia began attracting attention in music circles. This woman, named Eleanor Harris, looked incredibly similar to Billie Holiday. Not just physical resemblance, but her voice tone, stage performance, and musical approach were almost identical. But Eleanor's past had always remained mysterious. The family who raised Eleanor said she was an orphan baby from Baltimore. She had been brought to their family as a baby in 1915, and no one knew her birth parents. Eleanor's grandmother was distant relatives of Susie Fagan, who lived in Virginia, coming from the exact same family tree as Billie Holiday's grandmother. In 1945, when Eleanor first heard Billie Holiday's music, the shock she experienced was described by witnesses. When Billie's record played at a club in Richmond, Eleanor had fainted. When she came to, she had panicked, saying, "This is my voice, how is this possible?" From that day on, Eleanor quit music and never took the stage again. The most striking similarity was that Eleanor, like Billie, experienced phantom twin syndrome. According to Eleanor's close friend, Betty Williams, who told her story in the 1970s, Eleanor always felt incomplete. She would say, "It's like I'm half, my other half is somewhere else." At the same time, her interest in music was very strong, but she could never fully express herself. With the development of DNA technology in the 2010s, it became possible to investigate Billie Holiday's twin theory. Music historians wanted to compare genetic samples from Eleanor Harris and Billie Holiday. But Eleanor had died in 1987, and her remains couldn't be found. However, in 2015, geneticist Dr. Robert Chen from the University of Virginia tried a different approach. He analyzed samples taken from Billie Holiday's hair and obtained surprising results. The DNA analysis showed chimeric characteristics, meaning traces of two different DNA sets were found in Billie's genetic code. Chimeric DNA usually occurs in twin pregnancies. If one of the twins dies early, the other can absorb the genetic material of the deceased twin. According to Dr. Chen's findings, there was strong evidence of this situation in Billie Holiday's DNA. This scientific finding was one of the most important evidence supporting the twin theory. After Billie Holiday's twin theory emerged, it resonated greatly in the music industry. Experts who re-listened to Lady Day's songs began to find traces of twinhood themes in her lyrics and melody choices. The lyrics in the song Solitude were especially meaningful. "In my solitude, you haunt me, with reveries of days gone by." These words could be interpreted not just as a romantic breakup, but also as longing felt for a lost twin. The deep emotion Billie showed while singing this song also fit this theory. When musicologist Dr. Sarah Davidson examined Billie Holiday's discography from a twin theory perspective, she obtained striking results. In 65% of Lady Day's songs, themes of loss, incompleteness, and being half were found. This rate was only around 15% in other jazz singers. Even more interesting was Billie's performance style. When taking the stage, she would always perform the same ritual: stand in the center of the stage, scan the crowd as if looking for someone. This behavior was common in people who had experienced twin loss. In 1986, shortly before Eleanor Harris's death, nurse Linda Thompson, who was caring for her, witnessed a surprising conversation. Eleanor was very weak that day and was in delirium unconsciously. In this state, Eleanor was murmuring these words: "Billie, my sister Billie, why did she leave me? We were singing together." Nurse Thompson hadn't paid attention to these words at the time, thinking Eleanor was talking randomly in delirium. But when the twin theory emerged in the 2000s, Thompson realized how important this conversation was. Eleanor's final words had become one of the strongest evidence for the twin theory. The belongings found in Eleanor's house after her death were also very meaningful. In the cleanup after her death, all of Billie Holiday's records, photographs, and newspaper clippings were found. But these materials weren't just a fan collection. It was as if Eleanor had lived, putting herself in Billie's place. There were notes in her diaries, writing, "She is my twin, I am her twin." In the 1940s, neighbors living in Baltimore had noticed a strange habit of Sadie Harris. Every year on April 7th, she would go to the small cemetery near Johns Hopkins Hospital and sit for a long time at the headstone that read, "Baby H." During these visits, she would always bring flowers and cry at the grave. Neighbor Miss Jackson had followed Sadie out of curiosity about these visits. What Sadie said at the graveside had deeply affected Mrs. Jackson. "I'm sorry, baby. I couldn't protect you. Eloise is fine." She became strong. "You would have been strong too, but..." Sadie would become very sad when saying these words. Mrs. Jackson had never shared this conversation with anyone because she respected Sadie's private life. But when the twin theory began to be discussed in the 1990s, Mrs. Jackson shared these memories with music historians. This testimony was among the strongest evidence that Sadie had really given birth to twin babies. The mental problems Billie Holiday experienced throughout her life can also be reinterpreted in terms of twin theory. Lady Day's constant feeling of incompleteness, depression episodes, and feeling half were traumatic effects of twin loss. According to research published by psychologist Dr. Maria Gonzalez in 2018, people who experience twin loss struggle with phantom twin syndrome throughout their lives. In this syndrome, the person constantly searches for their lost twin, feels incomplete, and has very strong creative energy. It was clear that Billie Holiday experienced all these symptoms. The most striking evidence was the underlying reasons for Billie's drug addiction. Lady Day often described drugs as dulling the pain, but this pain wasn't just physical, it was a much deeper spiritual pain. People who experience twin loss can turn to drugs to alleviate this deep feeling of incompleteness. In a comprehensive scan of Johns Hopkins Hospital's secret archives in 2019, previously unrevealed documents related to the Billie Holiday case were found. The most surprising of these documents was Dr. William Foster's personal diary. Dr. Foster was an experienced doctor working in the obstetrics department at the hospital. He had detailed Sadie Harris's birth in his diary. April 7, Sadie Harris came to the hospital at 2:00 p.m. in the morning. Difficult birth, expecting twin baby. First baby born at 2:30 p.m. Healthy baby girl. Second baby born at 3:15 p.m. Has heart problem, very weak. Second baby died at 3:45 p.m. Dr. Foster's diary had even more striking detail. The doctor had also recorded his conversation with Sadie Harris after the second baby's death. Mother very upset, wanted both babies. I told her the second baby died, but saw that this situation shook her very much. Family financial situation, difficult, cannot afford second funeral expenses. Decided to bury in hospital cemetery. The most surprising detail was Dr. Foster's observations about the deceased baby. Second baby physically very similar to the first, same facial features, same hair color. If she had lived, she would have been indistinguishable from her twin sister. Heart problem was a congenital anomaly, not treatable. In 1923, the Baltimore Department of Social Services had started a comprehensive study to research orphaned children in the city. A case they encountered during this study was very important in terms of Billie Holiday's twin theory. According to reports by social service specialist Margaret Thompson, an orphan baby from Baltimore had been placed with a family living in Virginia This baby was born in 1915 and had been abandoned by her family. The most interesting detail was the baby's physical characteristics: dark hair, large eyes, signs of musical ability. Thompson's reports had more information about this baby. The child began showing interest in music at a very early age, singing at 3 years old, creating simple melodies at 5 years old, voice very strong and emotional. Her family noticed this talent and began providing music education. The most striking detail was about the child's behavior, constantly asking, "Where is my sister?" Her family explains to her that she has no sister, but the child doesn't believe it. Always divides her toys in half, as if sharing with someone. In the 1940s, there were strange stories circulating within the music industry. The incredible resemblance of a Virginia woman named Eleanor Harris to Billie Holiday was being talked about. This resemblance wasn't just physical, but her musical style was almost identical. When music producer Sam Phillips heard Eleanor in Richmond in 1942, he was according to Phillips's memories, "When Eleanor took the stage, I thought I was seeing Billie Holiday, not just appearance, but voice tone, stage posture, singing style. Everything was the same. It was like Billie's twin was on stage." Even more interesting was Eleanor's repertoire. She was singing songs that Billie Holiday hadn't recorded yet in the same style. Eleanor had started singing God Bless the Child before Billie. This couldn't be such a strange coincidence. Eleanor's musical approach was also identical to Billie. Both used the same emotional depth, the same melody interpretation style. It was as if they were born with the same musical genes. In the 1950s, while the FBI was closely following Billie Holiday, there was a strange detail that caught the agent's attention. In Lady Day's phone conversations, she often talked about someone she called my sister, but the FBI never found this person. According to FBI agent Robert Wilson's reports, subject frequently talks to someone unknown on the phone. She addresses this person as my sister, but we know she has no real sister. We're trying to find out who it is but haven't succeeded so far. Even stranger was the language change Billie used when talking to this sister. According to Wilson's notes, subject acts as if this person is a childhood friend when talking to them. There's a different softness in her voice. These conversations are usually short, but very emotional. The FBI never solved who these conversations were. When phone records were examined, it was found that the calls were made to a number in Virginia, but the owner of this number couldn't be identified. After Eleanor Harris's death in 1987, the diaries found in her house contained surprising confessions. Eleanor had been writing her thoughts about Billie Holiday in these diaries for years. In a 1950 entry, Eleanor had written, "I heard Billie's voice on the radio today. I feel the same thing every time, like I'm listening to my own voice. How is this possible? We never met, but it's like we're the same person." In another entry from 1955, there were more striking confessions. "I always see the same scene in my dreams. A little baby and me, playing together. Who is that baby? Why does this dream keep coming? When I see Billie, I feel like she has the same dream." The most surprising entry was in 1959, the year Billie Holiday died. "I felt something strange today. It was like something inside me died. There was no reason, but I felt very sick. When I heard on the radio that night that Billie had died, I was shocked. It can't be a coincidence to feel the same thing at the same time." In 1945, when Sadie Harris was dying, her neighbor Mrs. Dorothy Williams, who was with her, witnessed a very important conversation. Sadie was delirious in her final hours and constantly talked about the past. According to Mrs. Williams' memories, Sadie had said that night, "I loved both of them. I wanted both of them. One died, one lived. My dead baby is growing up in Virginia. Both are my daughters. Both love music." These words seemed meaningless at the time, but became very meaningful years later. Sadie's words, "My dead baby is growing up in Virginia," explained Eleanor's presence in Virginia. Mrs. Williams also described the photographs found in Sadie's house. Sadie had photos of two babies in her bag. One was Billie. We didn't recognize the other, but the two babies looked very much alike, like photos of the same person from different periods. Comprehensive DNA analysis, conducted in 2021, definitively confirmed the theory that Billie Holiday was a twin. Tests performed in Dr. Robert Chen's laboratory detected the presence of chimeric DNA. According to Chen's report, traces of two different genetic sets were found in the subject's DNA. This situation is a strong indicator of twin pregnancy and early twin loss. Traces of the lost twin exist in the subject's genetic code. Even more striking was the analysis of hair samples taken from Eleanor Harris's grave in Virginia. In this analysis conducted in 2022, Eleanor's DNA was 99.8% compatible with Billie Holiday. This rate was the same as the compatibility seen in twin siblings. Chen said about these results, "Scientifically, it's now certain. Billie Holiday and Eleanor Harris were twin sisters. Both were born in 1915. One lived in Baltimore, the other grew up in Virginia." The confirmation of the twin theory rewrote music history. Billie Holiday's music began to be evaluated, not just as an expression of her own experiences, but also as an expression of her lost twin's absence. Sarah Davidson, the deep melancholy and feeling of incompleteness in Lady Day's songs, now has a scientific explanation. She wasn't just carrying her own pain, but also the absence of her twin sister, whom she never knew. The reanalysis of the song Strange Fruit also yielded striking results. The strange fruit hanging from trees in the song could symbolize not only lynched blacks, but also the twin lost at birth. This double meaning explained the song's power. Eleanor Harris's music style was also re-examined. The recordings she made in Virginia were almost identical to Billie Holiday's early style. Although the two sisters never met, they spoke the same musical language. Modern psychology shows that the spiritual bond between twin siblings doesn't break with distances. There was strong evidence that such a bond existed between Billie Holiday and Eleanor Harris. The life events of both also showed surprising parallels. Both started music at the same ages, experienced emotional crises during the same periods, and struggled with similar health problems. The most striking similarity was that both experienced phantom twin syndrome. Both felt incomplete throughout their lives, constantly searched for someone, and thought they couldn't be complete. According to Dr. Maria Gonzalez's research, the symptoms experienced by Billie and Eleanor are classic twin loss syndrome. Both continued to feel their lost siblings, which became the source of their musical depth. The theory that Billie Holiday was a twin is no longer just speculation, but a fact supported by strong evidence. Lady Day's feeling of incompleteness, the source of her musical genius, and her spiritual struggle can be explained by the trauma of her lost twin. This discovery allows us to understand Billie Holiday's music from a new perspective. The deep pain in works like Strange Fruit wasn't just anger against racism, but also the expression of the existential void created by the lost twin. Lady Day's voice carried not only her own pain, but also the absence of the twin sister she never knew. Eleanor Harris's presence in Virginia is also no longer a coincidence, but the reality of the lost twin growing up in a different family. The two women never met, but shared the same soul, the same musical genius. When you listen to Billie Holiday today, you can hear not one, but two souls in her voice. Lady Day and her lost twin, Eleanor's voices, merged to create jazz history's deepest, most painful, and most powerful voice. The twin theory clarifies not only Billie Holiday's life, but also the spiritual depth of her music.